9 a.m., and that means it is time for us to begin our work. I ask everyone to please be seated as I call the 74th Convention of the Communications Workers of America to order.
So in these next minutes, I want to try to do two things. I want to talk about our bargaining power that is clearly under attack and what we can do by building that broader movement that Ed talked about, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because it's the best chance to build that bargaining power back. And across this union, that's what's on the minds of our members. And so we'll try to connect everything here in these 2 days and in these next minutes to exactly that. 75 years ago, the National Federation of Telephone Workers formed after its predecessor was ruled to be a company union by the newly constituted, at the time, National Labor Relations Board. 10 years later, several organizations, including the Telephone Workers Organizing Committee, active in the South, and other independent unions united to form CWA, joining IUE, NABIT, and the Newspaper Guild in the CIO. Others here among us, such as AFA and the printing sector, then ITU, were part of the AFL. At that time, our public sector members were in states that did not recognize public sector unions, as most still do not today, including our members in Texas, Mississippi, West Virginia, Tennessee, Oklahoma, and more. So we are, and always have been, a union from many sources and traditions. We value the power we create when mobilized. We value the power we've built as we organize. We're willing to explore new ideas as we seek new strategies. This was true when our family standard of living was rising from those early days through the 70s. But it's just as true today as that standard of living barely hangs on. The triple threat of founding President Joe Byrne became the CWA triangle of representation, organizing, and political action with President Morty Barr. Morty is well, but missing us at his first convention since 1954. He continues to help lead the Elderly Housing Development Corporation, providing senior housing. Secretary Treasurer Emeritus Barbara Easterling, not here with us today, but continues to lead the Alliance of Retired Americans. With us is ask our delegates from Wisconsin, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, just how hard it is resisting the attacks from state government on our bargaining rights. Ask our CenturyLink delegates from District 7, working through the acquisition of Quest, after US West, and now 8 months battling for their first contract with their new owner. Or as Ed discussed, the Verizon members in the East striking for 2 weeks. Not really for a contract at that time, one strike, but to force the company off the worst set of concessionary demands in our telecom history, and to bring that fight to the attention of our union in this nation. Then another year of bargaining and mobilizing, and finally reaching an agreement that maintained our standard of living, with huge help from all of CWA and our allies. Ask our AT&T members across the country, working past expiration with constant mobilization and walkouts. Or NABIT CWA members at ABC, working 2 years past expiration, now in ratification on a tentative agreement that will prevent imposed conditions. Ask our U.S. Airways flight attendants, after bargaining for 7 years, just reached a new agreement and now battling to survive as the company has merged to become the new American Airlines. Ask our public workers in New Jersey, in the 4th year with Chris Christie, the first of the right-wing governors who stripped all health care bargaining rights. Now our members face $4,000 a year premiums for family health care. Or New York Times journalists engaging in unprecedented job actions that secure their agreement. Or our manufacturing members in IUE CWA, faced now with the worst trade agreement ever, the so-called Trans-Pacific Partnership, or TPP, despite a Democratic White House. Or ask those among us without any bargaining rights, who are struggling to join CWA, to even have the ability to negotiate with their employer. Is all this too much to bear? Is it too negative? Is it hopeless? Not just hard? No. No, it's not. Because we make a difference. In your packets, when you register with the CWA News, and inside the CWA News were the highlights of the last 2 years. Check out this list. Yes, it's hard. But every sector, division, district had successes. It's hard, but it's not hopeless. Hard, yes. Hopeless, no. Witness organizing gains at AFA CWA, and we welcome here 9,300 flight attendants from United Continental. We will hear much more about organizing on all fronts tomorrow. Hard, yes. Hopeless, no. We ratified contracts for over 100,000 members at AT&T, the 38,000 at Verizon, 10,000 at GE, 750 nurses at Mercy Hospital, 750 journalists at Bloomberg's Bureau of National Affairs, just to name a few. Hard, yes. Hopeless, no. Movement building and creative mobilization, like Reimagine CBC, led by the Canadian Media Guild. Young activists, community leaders, literally reinventing the mission of their main employer, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. Hard, yes. Hopeless, no. Look at the coalition work and Stand Up for Ohio, led by District 4, partnering with the Center for Community Change, the Ohio Organizing Collaborative, and continuing the amazing work of Seth Rosen, linking our members with those in community organizations in a unified strategy. Or the No Knives on Planes campaign by flight attendants, fighting for their safety and our safety when we fly. Hard, yes. Hopeless, no. In these highlights, we have nearly 100 positive examples involving the majority of our members in some way, and there are many more. Hard, not hopeless. Central to what we do is our bargaining power. But if we define our fight as solely against our union employers, then non-union employers in virtually all of our sectors and industries get a free ride. And the non-union employers are growing stronger in every industry where we work. Unfettered, they drive down working conditions and pay. There's no check or counterbalance. And in turn, that undermines what we can achieve. That is why we have focused on organizing and organizing rights as part of our collective bargaining strategy, not separate. We know if we only focus on the union employers because we can, because we have the right to bargain, and we fail to focus on the non-union employers, or on the anti-union political environment, or fail to recognize that there are limits to what union employers will agree to in negotiations, we are not really confronting our reality, and we will not succeed. This doesn't mean that we don't fight for the best deal possible. But as we know, bargaining is a Today, it is certainly not about justice. Bargaining takes place as employers increase their profits by holding down our wages and benefits. Bargaining takes place in an environment of comparisons to the non-union industry and the global economy. Balancing our aspirations, our dreams for a better contract with the reality of dominant non-union industries is our greatest challenge in 75 years. Our bargaining committee members have become heroes. When elected, none know how long they will be there, except that they are there one day longer than the employer's resistance. As I said, every district, division, sector faces tough, prolonged, almost impossible bargaining challenges. I'd now like every delegate here who has served as a bargaining committee member in the past 2 years to stand and be recognized. And please remain standing. Every bargaining committee member, stand and remain standing. I'd like all the staff who have worked with these committees to stand. All the staff who have worked in bargaining, stand up. And now the members of this executive board who've worked day and night supporting these committees and staff to win the best possible contracts for our members, please stand as well. Join me in recognizing at this convention, we will look at ways to strengthen our union and also help shape the world around us. We can't pretend, we can't think that we can fix our bargaining solely by perfecting CWA. As we debate internal structural changes that we will make as a union, we must do it with respect. We sometimes tear each other down, and to succeed, we must lift each other up. Whether we adopt one proposal or another, the executive boards or not, bargaining will be just as brutal, and we may often disagree. That's what our democracy is here. It is simple to shout. We need to fight harder, or bargain longer, or even strike. It's simple to say with better leaders we'd have better contracts. But we must evaluate our bargaining results in terms of what others around us are achieving. We bargain in America with falling wages, healthcare losses, and the elimination of pensions. We can definitely coordinate better, as we have, and as we will, whether everyone agrees or not. But as I said a few years ago to Ron Gettelfinger, then the UAW president, during the near collapse of the auto industry in 2009. Ron, your negotiations are much harder than what Walter Reuther faced. Reuther was leading a growing labor movement with increasing political power and millions of workers with a history of standing up and fighting back. These are hard times, but in hard times, there are times of resistance. We learn what makes a difference and what does not. We learn how to create hope. We learn who our true brothers and sisters are. We learn about solidarity, about caring, about love. And it's our solidarity and love for each other that will carry us through this dark period in our history. No group in our union, and perhaps anywhere, better captures the spirit of resistance than Local 1109 and the 300 Brooklyn Cablevision technicians who battled to form their union and win an NLRB election. And now, for over a year, they've been bargaining for their first contract. After a year in negotiations, getting nowhere, 22 technicians decided to use Cablevision's open door policy and going to see their manager and asking to meet. Instead of meeting, the manager told them that they were considered to be on strike and were therefore fired and permanently replaced. Local 1109 and District 1 mobilized all of New York City, literally, with amazing rallies and support from nearly every elected official, and eventually, all 22 came back to work. You can feel that spirit. We can feel that energy. Jerome and Paul, in that bargaining unit, Chitoya worked there before as a customer service agent. And the support and the love from this union, from Local 1109 and District 1, are the best in America. But the problem is, in today's bargaining and political climate, it takes that kind of spirit and that kind of effort and enormous bravery to form a union. It shouldn't. It wasn't always that way. But today, we find that the path to organizing that built our union is largely blocked. And you see a chart, the U.S. on the end in red. The lowest bargaining coverage of virtually any democracy. We only have several of them there. That's the famous 6%, 6.5% private sector, and now dropping public sector, so 12% overall. We don't show that chart because it's hopeless. We show that chart because we're not where the global economy is. We're not where most democracies are. And our challenge here, as daunting as it may seem, is to figure out how we take hope from Cablevision technicians, how we take hope from workers in the rest of the world. The most important factors that influence our own bargaining possibilities are, in fact, the percentage that are organized by collective bargaining. As I said, ours is the lowest in the developed world. That's why that story of Peabody Coal, why retiree health care in our union as well, and pensions, are under attack. And throughout the nation, they're disappearing. But not in Germany, or not in Brazil, where unions and democracy are rising up. In those nations, real wages after inflation are also rising. While except for union workers in this country, wages are actually falling. One amazing story, Brazilian bank workers, are union. In Sao Paulo, Brazil alone, almost 500,000 of them. Today, those bank workers in Brazil, mostly customer service workers, back office workers, earn more than bank workers in the United States. And the Brazilian bank workers, recognizing that, has allocated $300,000 to help CWA organize bank workers here. They realize that when they work for Bank of New York or Wells Fargo in Sao Paulo, those companies are based here. And if workers here have no rights, that sets limits on what they can gain. Our traditional answer to building power in our industries is organizing. But that does grow harder and harder because of this disgusting employer opposition. So we devised together our strategy to engage in political action to change organizing rights. Change organizing rights, it increases our bargaining power, improves our bargaining. It's back to that percentage that was on that chart. But here too we run into roadblocks set up by corporate America, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the 1%, their allies. Remember just a few years ago, 2008, President Obama ran on a program to enact the Employee Free Choice Act. That bill passed overwhelmingly in the House of Representatives. Representatives, but not in the U.S. Senate, even though it had majority support. Wasn't debated for 1 second because the Senate rules, which have grown worse and worse, require 60 votes just to put the bill on the floor for discussion. For 2 years, I've been asked frequently, why is CWA involved in Senate rules? Boring, boring, boring. Seems distant from these fights in front of us. I've been asked, we need to focus on our pay, on our health care. Why are we out there on Senate rules? And this is the beginning of this discussion on this democracy movement and how it relates directly to our bargaining. It's on our minds constantly. And I answer, if we don't change the Senate rules, we will never, don't let any politician tell us differently, we will never get health care legislation, the kind we really need. And health care at the bargaining table will continue to be only about givebacks, since non-union employers across the U.S. are dumping health care in droves. If we don't change the Senate rules, we can't pass anything close to the Employee Free Choice Act. And so while we celebrate those Cablevision technicians, it shouldn't be that way. And if hundreds of thousands were joining our union as they would, our bargaining would be going up as it was when it was going up. Even worse, now, if we don't change the Senate rules, this President's 5 nominations for the National Labor Relations Board, they're sitting there now, will not be confirmed. And that means the unfair practice charges from our bargaining will mean nothing. The failure of the U.S. Senate to confirm those 5 members means there will not be a Democratic majority on the NLRB, and that no new NLRB rules will be adopted for organizing or anything else. And we can't accept that. And that is why we are trying, and are in fact leading labor, and going to our allies, the Democracy Initiative that Ed talked about, to take a stand and demand that the Democratic leadership step up and confirm the full members of the NLRB. And right now and here, we must send a clear message that we will not settle for 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans. And that's what they have in store for us. We will not settle for that. We demand a Democratic majority on the NLRB. And that will mean that Harry Reid will have to do what the Republican majority leader did in 2005. He will have to take the floor and say to the Republicans, I'm going to change the rules now in the middle of the Congress. And as we all know, it would have been much easier to do on the first day. And I'm going to change the rules now unless you confirm those NLRB nominations, more than 24 judges that have been held up, the head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. You have a choice, Republican minority. Either confirm them all, we're going to change the rules, so as it should be, by majority we can confirm the President's nominations. And again, that sounds boring. It sounds maybe even too hard. But as we sit here and as we debate so much that will be before us about movement building, it's not abstract, it's about serious fights. In this case, with the Democratic Senate. Everyone tells us every 2 years in federal elections, elect them, elect them, elect them. And in 2012, we elected 2 more of them. And then they didn't change the rules. And they set up this situation where first the Court of Appeals ruled that the recess appointments were unconstitutional, And now they have no rules as it stands to get the 3 Democrats confirmed. And our members that are hurting from this bargaining crisis need to understand those connections. And we will be prepared here to go in every state where those Democrats are not taking action, ready to fight for those confirmations, and we will take over their office. We put them on notice right now. We will stand up, sit down in their office, and we will sit there till we get a commitment that they will confirm a Democratic majority on the National Labor Relations Board. No more excuses. And it's only a start. In 2010, the Supreme Court ruled in Citizens United that corporations were people. Imagine that. And money was speech. A total perversion of our democracy. In the federal election last November, $7 billion was spent. Up $1 billion from 2008. That billion was not from working class people. It was all from the 1%. The super wealthy and their corporate allies are buying the ability to block our legislative agenda that would improve our bargaining status and organizing rights. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce in the last 25 years has taken full control of the Republican Party's economic agenda. And sadly, with the donations of the 1%, they heavily influence the Democrats as well. Think about this. Every open Senate election, on average now, is $40 million. $40 million. This is why, as Ed mentioned, we helped form, as one of the 4 conveners, the Democracy Initiative. We joined with the Sierra Club, the NAACP, and Greenpeace, and then almost 100 other groups have joined key labor, environmental, faith, women's organizations. We must stop the pollution of big money. Our battle cry is money out, voters in. Money out, voters in. The power of the 1% grew further when their political allies in 30 states in the last 2 years since we met began to purge voter registration rolls, making it more difficult for the poor, the young, and the old to vote. This is voter suppression. It's undemocratic, and we must stop it as well. These are 3 of the 4 cornerstones of this democracy movement. Change the Senate rules, big money out of politics, win universal voter registration, so all citizens can vote. On average, 70% of American citizens are registered. That's also, just like bargaining coverage, the lowest of any democracy in the world. Brazil, 100%. Australia, 100%. All those other countries we saw on the graph, voter registration in the 90s. That missing 30%, those are working class people. Those are our voters. And it's a deliberate strategy to hold down registration, to hold down our voice. The 4th part of our democracy movement is immigration reform. Last week, the U.S. Senate began to consider a new immigration policy that includes a path to citizenship for 11 million immigrants. Our democracy work includes support for a path to citizenship, not just because it is a critical human rights issue, but because those 11 million new citizens would be our voters. They're working class voters. We need to support changes that will help secure our economic future just as much as immigrants need our support to achieve a path to citizenship. In the election, don't come across on our issues because they've gotten money from the dark side. We need, and we will, seek out primary elections and challenge those Democrats who are not on our program. We will find candidates and only support candidates who stand with us and are ready to fight for change. And that will take your effort, not my words. And many among us, even in labor, will shrink from that and say, how can you do that at a time like this? The question is, how can we not do it at a time like this? So the new triangle brochure, largely the same. The third side of the triangle is now movement building, not simply community and political action, as our founders described it. 75 years ago, when CWA originated as the Federation of Telephone Workers, there was a clear path to bargaining rights through organizing and through political action. That third side then was about union citizenship, supporting the New Deal, and that democracy. But today, that path is blocked. We can't accept these rules that are fixed. We must return to our progressive roots and build a new movement that will create a new path to achieve positive change. Now there's no NLRB to do it. They're not giving up, they're standing up and fighting back. And imagine if Cablevision and the rest of Comcast and the wireless companies were organized for telecom members, what that would mean. And imagine for manufacturing workers, if we had organizing rights, not a class war to get a contract, what would be happening in manufacturing across this country? Imagine that in the media sector, or in the public sector, where bargaining rights are being crushed instead of lifted up. And that's what this convention will largely be about. You'll hear in just a few minutes our Defense Fund Committee report. And then later in the next 2 days, many of our resolutions will be about movement building. And many here may feel that it's hard or distant, but without it, it may be hopeless. The Defense Fund came up with that idea, not the Executive Board, to move part of the investment income from the Members' Relief Fund to movement building. And we'll couple those funds with the strategic industry funds and our general fund, and most importantly, what you do every day in local unions, so that our union can play a major role in fighting for our economic agenda and transforming our industries, as we've been doing. Some may say this is too big a reach for CWA members. But this executive board and so many of you are saying, if not now, when? If we don't build a much deeper movement now, when? If we don't fight for universal voter registration and against suppression now, when? If we don't demand that Democrats confirm an NLRB with a Democratic majority that will make decisions that support us now, when? If we don't stand up for retiree health care, not just in our own union, but across the nation now, when? This is our time to take up this challenge, and if not now, when? As usual, today and tomorrow, you will be debating critical issues with total respect for all viewpoints. But let's send a clear and strong message that we are standing up and fighting back. Let's send a message that we will continue to stand for change, inside CWA and outside. Our members must hear the message of Pittsburgh loud and clear. What do we do when we're under attack? We stand up, we fight